Many people think that just because there's corruption in the Catholic Church is not true. But these people, sadly, don't know the Bible. Because if they knew the Bible, they would know that Jesus taught that there would be bad people in the church. Paul taught that there would be corruption and bad people in the church, even in the hierarchy. But it never says the church is false. Jesus said the church would be there until the end of time, and that the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And in 1 Timothy 3:15, it says the church is the pillar and foundation of truth. So just because there's bad people in the church doesn't mean the church isn't true. And this is difficult, especially in our age when everything is confusing, dark. I mean, many people don't live for God today. Many people have chosen to walk away from God, even in the church. And the devil attacks the church. I mean, look at the second reading, Matthew 13:24-30. It's the parable of the weeds and the wheat. It says that a man sowed wheat in his field. Of course, that person is Jesus. And while his men were sleeping, it doesn't say it was at night. It just says while the men were sleeping, an enemy came in and sowed weeds so that the weeds and the wheat grew up together. And the men came out and said, "Oh my gosh, what shall we do? What happened? What happened?" And the man said, "An enemy came in. I gave you guys the charge to watch my wheat and to make sure it grows. And you were supposed to care for the fields, but an enemy has come in when you weren't looking and did this." And the men turned to the master and say, "Well, should we take out the weeds?" The man says, "No, because if you take out the weeds, you may also take out the wheat with it. And then we will have nothing." And most people understand that in this passage, the weeds are darnel, which is a poisonous type of weeds, which looks exactly like wheat in the beginning. But when they both come to fruition at the end, they are clearly distinct, and you can tell the difference between the two. That's why the master in this parable says, "Wait till harvest, and then I will have the people separate the weeds and the wheat. The wheat will be taken into my barn, whereas the weeds will be bundled up and burned." In other words, hell. They will go to hell. And so this is the way it is in the church too. God made a perfect church. He is perfect. His church is perfect, but the people in there are not perfect. But even so, they promised to follow Jesus, and they promised to give their life, and they promised for the truth, and they promised to live for him. And then somewhere they were not on guard, and evil came into the church. Now, through many, many periods of the church, they fought off the evil. In the early church, they fought off the evil. Even in the Middle Ages, so many heresies tried to come into the church and they fought it off. The church was vigilant and they said, "No, this is not from God. No, this is not an original teaching. No, this is not found in the Bible." And they were vigilant about expunging evil and heresy from the church. But at other times, just as the men in this passage did, they slept. They slept. They were slothful. They were lazy. And they let evil into the church. They let bad things into the church. They let bad men into the church, even into the leadership. And then the bad leadership, of course, because they're evil, allows other bad evil into the church, and then it becomes a problem. Now, should we get rid of the evil? Now, should we expect Jesus to just get rid of all the evil in the church and the church to be perfect? Of course not. Jesus specifically said there will be weeds and wheat until the end of time. And so why should we expect anything different? Why should we expect unreasonably that the church is going to be perfect? Why should we expect anything different? Jesus specifically said that at the end of time, he will divide the weeds and the wheat. One will go to heaven, one will go to hell. One will be gathered into his barn, and one will be bundled up to be burned. And so it is with the church. There's going to be evil in the church, people. There's going to be bad things. There's going to be corruption. Now, that doesn't mean it's good. It's bad. But you know what the problem is? The Catholics who are sleeping, the clergy who's sleeping, the hierarchy who's sleeping, the people who aren't doing anything about it. People like you and me who, we condemn this and we condemn that, but we're living mortal sin ourselves. We're living in sin ourselves. We're not living the covenant that Christ gave us, and yet we're condemning other people for not living the covenant. There are people who are addicted to pornography and having sex before marriage and doing all sorts of abominable things, but then looking at the clergy and saying, "Look at how evil they are," when you are evil yourself. Do you know why the saints fixed the church? Because they were holy. Do you know why Martin Luther did not reform the church? Because he was not holy. He had a temper and drank and was a womanizer and had scrupulosity and had a lot of the problems. He had good intentions, but was not the man for the job. When he ran into corruption, it made him angry, it made him bitter, and it made him worse. It made him go off the edge. And in fact, people like St. Francis de Sales, who we have a whole video on if you're interested, St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, and many others ran into the same corruption, ran into the same problems. They lived around the time Luther did, but they reformed the church because when they ran into these problems, they didn't get angry, they didn't get bitter, they didn't start yelling and name-calling and saying everyone's evil and heretics and everything else. You know what they did? They prayed more. They prayed harder. They went to confession more. They prayed more rosaries. They got on their knees. They fasted and they lived their life. And God shined his light through them and they ended up reforming the church. St. Francis de Sales alone converted 60,000 Calvinists by himself back to the Catholic Church because that's how powerful his life was. That's how powerful the lives of the saints are. When we are saints, we're going to change the world. The problem is not out there. The problem's in here. When we are saints, we will reform the church. And the problem is we don't have enough saints in the church. There are weeds and there are wheat even in the clergy, even in the hierarchy, even in the curia. And it's frustrating and it's aggravating to see that people in the church who are supposed to be holy are not. In their wolves in sheep's clothing. They're weeds that look like wheat. Notice the weeds and the wheat look exactly the same. But this darnel weed that's being talked about in the Bible is actually a poisonous weed. And it can hurt and destroy everything around it, which is why many people lose their faith when they see corruption and evil in the church. But the problem is that people are letting it affect their faith when they don't realize that Jesus is the head of the church. No man is the head of the church. Jesus is the ultimate head of the church. And we don't leave Jesus because of a man. And we don't leave the church he started because people fail to live their faith. It's not the people who fail to live their faith, who don't follow Jesus, who do sexual abuse, who do other things. It's not those people who are the true Catholics. They're fakes. Wolves in sheep's clothing. They're not the real Catholics. So why would we blame the church on them? They're not living Jesus. They're not living for the church. They're not living the way they are supposed to. They're evil. So why would we say that's the church? On the other side, there are millions of Catholics who love Jesus, who live their faith, who work at hospitals and combat drug trafficking and do everything that Christ calls them to do. That is the church that Jesus started. The people who follow Christ are the ones who are supposed to be the church. Those are the people we model the church off. That is exactly what Jesus has wanted. So why do we base the church off of people who don't live the faith? We should be basing it off of people who do live the faith. And people out there, you have to realize there's going to be weeds and wheat until the end of time. But that does not affect us. We are called to make a difference. We are called to step up. We are called to have more faith. We are called to make a difference in some way and to be holy. And that starts with having a deep prayer life ourselves. Make no mistake, the weeds in the church will be bundled up and burned if they do not repent. And I don't care if that's a priest, a bishop, or a pope. There have been many bad popes in the history of the Catholic Church. Many more good popes, of course. The majority have been, good. But there have been bad popes, and they will answer to God on Judgment Day. That should not affect our faith. If you go to Judgment Day and God said, why didn't you attend church? I gave you the supreme gift of the Eucharist. Why didn't you come receive me in the Eucharist? And you say, oh, because there's hypocrites in church, God. Oh, there's evil people in church, God. People did bad things, God. He's going to say, yes, they did. But what does that have to do with you? What does that have to do with your relationship with me? And on Judgment Day, it's going to be between you and God, not between anyone else and God, between you and God. Are you going to do what God asks you? God asks you to receive him in the Eucharist. Jesus said, unless you receive my flesh and blood, you have no life within you. Go to church. Come receive Jesus in the Eucharist. Come to church. You know what the word Eucharist means? It means thanksgiving. We go to church not because of hypocrites and not because of anyone else. We go there to praise and thank and love and worship Jesus Christ our Lord, who died on the cross and gave us everything. And so we go to church and give up even just a little bit out of love for him. He's calling you. How are you going to live for him today more than yesterday? I hope you liked this video. I hope you found it inspirational. I hope you found it helpful, informative, challenging. I mean, that's what we want to do on these spiritual videos, is to challenge us in the faith, to help us grow, to help us get better, and help us to come closer to Christ, and to transform our lives in Him. We need more motivation. We need more inspiration. A lot of times we're not getting it from the church. We're not getting it from the people we're supposed to. And so we want to help inspire, challenge, grow, and motivate your faith in a good way. And so that's what these Fridays are going to be for, these spiritual Fridays. And I hope you like it. And if you do, please like the video and please leave a comment down below. And please, if you haven't, subscribe to our channel if you want more motivation and inspiration. And please share this with others so they can have that motivation and inspiration as well. And if you know people who have left the church or are struggling with their faith or struggling with the corruption, send them this video. And also find our other video on this channel, which we'll link at the end. It's how to forgive the church. There are many people who have been hurt by the church, including this guy who has been very, very hurt by the toxic people within the church. And I've had to forgive again and again the church, not the church Christ started, but the people in the church. And we all need to sometimes come and forgive the people in the church because they are poisonous, like those weeds. Darnel is a poisonous weed, and people in the church are like that many times. Not just in the Catholic Church, but Protestant churches. I've seen it many times in Protestant churches, and Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, everywhere there's poison, because that's how the devil works. But I pray that you will be light, and I pray that you will be salt, and I pray that you will be wheat, and please pray that I will be too. Thank you so much for watching, and God bless you.